The storm was not merely fierce, it was merciless. Snow didn't fall. It slashed sideways under the cold, hard glow of streetlights, slicing across the barren sidewalks like tiny, vindictive blades. The wind shrieked between the concrete buildings of Queens, not just loud but wounded, like it carried grief in its howl. Midnight had long passed, and the city, usually sleepless, now lay buried in silence, blanketed beneath a suffocating tide of white. Silas Cade trudged through it, his steps heavy in the snow, the weight in his arms heavier still. His 6-year-old daughter, Ava, slept against his shoulder, her soft breath creating little clouds against the collar of his coat. She always felt heavier when asleep, as though the entire day's play, laughter, and dreams had settled deep into her bones. Silas adjusted her with a tenderness shaped by routine and sacrifice. The crunch of his worn work boots, the only sound accompanying them on their slow march home from his overnight shift. Then he saw her, a shape half collapsed on a frozen bus. Stop bench, a woman, alone, her limbs sprawled awkwardly, her long legs seemingly buckled, like they'd simply given out under the weight of the storm or something deeper. Her coat was elegant, clearly expensive, now frosted with snow and grit, but she didn't move, didn't shiver, didn't react. Silas froze, his gut twisted. Not tonight, he thought grimly. He stepped off the curb without hesitation, instincts kicking in, shielding Ava closer to his chest. He crossed the empty street and called out, "Ma'am, hey, are you all right?" No response. As he knelt beside her, Ava stirred faintly. "Daddy," she murmured. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just hold on," he whispered, brushing a gloved hand across the stranger's face. Her eyes were open, barely, glazed over like ice on glass. Her lips were tinged a haunting blue, and a thin cut trace across her temple, glittering in the cold like a crack in porcelain. "Hey," he said more firmly, trying to summon life into her vacant gaze. "Can you hear me?" Her mouth moved. A sound escaped, fragile and broken. "I missed the bus," she whispered. A grim chuckle escaped him. "Yeah, you and every train in this storm." He looked around, desperation washing over him. No cabs, no traffic, not even the distant hum of a food delivery bike. They were utterly alone in this wide-out world. He sighed hard, resigned, and shifted Ava to one arm. Then, peeling off his coat, he wrapped it around the woman's trembling form. "All right," he said, more to himself than her. "You're coming with me." Her eyes flickered. "What? You're freezing. You're bleeding. And this snow isn't stopping. You can either come with me or take your chances with frostbite." She tried to straighten, but her legs betrayed her. "I don't know you," she rasped. "You don't have to," he said plainly. "I'm not asking for trust. Just trying to make sure you live to see tomorrow." He tightened the coat around her as gently as possible. "You want to gamble on dying out here. That's your right. But if you want to survive, stand up." She stared at him, bewildered, the question barely leaving her lips. "Who are you?" "Just a janitor with a conscience," he said, with a hint of weariness. From his shoulder came a tiny voice. "Is she okay, Daddy?" The woman's gaze turned slowly toward Ava. Something shifted behind those tired eyes, just a flicker, something maternal, perhaps, or simply the distant memory of safety. Silas didn't wait for permission. He bent, grunting slightly under the weight, and lifted the woman into his arms. "You'll be all right," he murmured, now carrying both of them through the storm. "Just stay with me." His apartment was nothing special, small, outdated, a little too warm from the old radiator hissing in the corner, but it was home. And tonight, it was sanctuary. He laid her gently onto his weathered couch, throwing a soft blanket over her. Ava curled into the nearby armchair, gripping her stuffed bunny with sleepy arms. Silas knelt beside the woman and carefully dabbed her forehead with a damp cloth. The wound was shallow, most likely a slip on the ice. A simple butterfly bandage would do. She stirred. Her voice barely broke the quiet. "We're in my place," he said, matter of fact, "just until the roads are safe again." Her eyes drifted around the modest apartment, taking in the mismatched furniture, The faint smell of baby shampoo, the cozy chaos of a single father's world. You live here with your daughter. He nodded. Just Ava and me. She stared at him, something like guilt pulling in her expression. You shouldn't have helped me. He met her gaze, steady. You'd rather I left you there? I didn't ask to be saved. His jaw tensed. I know. Silas stood and returned with a chipped mug of tea. You don't owe me anything, he said, setting it near her hand. Drink. Rest. When the storm passes, I'll get you home. She didn't reply, but then softly, what's your name? He hesitated. Silas. She nodded faintly. Lara. Silas looked at her, as if trying to match the name with the woman before him. You don't look like a Lara. Oh, she asked, voice barely there. You look like someone who's used to being in charge and hates not being in control. That earned him the smallest smile, half annoyed, half amused. I'll be out of your way soon. No rush, he said, turning to leave. Storm's not in a hurry. Neither am I. That night, while the wind continued to moan through the thin window panes and snow piled against the door, Lara lay still on a stranger's couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and comfort, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. Light woke her jaw soft. Warm light spilling across a ceiling she didn't recognize. A distant clink of dishes, the hiss of a radiator, the scent of cinnamon and something baking. She blinked. Her body ached. Her head throbbed, but she was warm. That was the most bewildering part. A child giggled. A kettle whistled. A soft voice, low and worn. Hush, the child gently dosed Silas. She remembered his name before anything else. She sat up to fast. Her hand flew to her temple bandaged. A blanket cocooned around her. Her boots had been removed and now sat drying by the heater. Her coat was neatly folded beside her. Across the room, Eva sat at a tiny table coloring, feet swinging and mismatched. Socks? Silas stood at the stove, pouring tea into the same chipped mug. He turned and caught her stirring. You're awake, he said. No kidding, she muttered, wincing. You moved quick for someone who could barely speak last night. I have a meeting at 9, she added automatically. He raised a brow. That meeting's going to wait. You nearly froze to death in a blizzard. Your phone, dead. Unless that meeting involves angels, you're not making it. She accepted the mug but didn't sip. You should have left me there. Silas settled onto the armrest of a chair opposite her, expression unreadable. People who say that never really mean it. She looked at him, really looked. He wasn't posturing, wasn't trying to impress. He just was. I don't like debts, she said quietly. Good, he replied, because I'm not collecting. That stopped her. Everyone wanted something. There was always a motive, an angle, a cost. But not here. Where'd you learn to do this? She asked, gesturing to the bandage. My mom, nurse at a free clinic. She could fix anything with 3 fingers and a Band-Aid. She sounds fierce. She was. A pause. She passed 5 years ago. I'm sorry. He nodded. So was I. They fell into silence, comfortable, not awkward. The kind of silence people earn. From her corner, Eva looked up. Miss Lara, do you like bunnies? Lara blinked. Sorry? Eva held up her picture, a child's drawing, crude but heartfelt. 3 stick figures stood beneath a sky full of snowflakes. A tall one, a small one, and one in the middle, wearing a bright pink bow. A floating bunny hovered nearby, majestic and silly. That's you, Eva explained. 'Cause you look like a snow princess when Daddy carried you. Lara stared at the drawing. Something broke inside her chest, soft and unguarded. I love it. Eva beamed. Silas said nothing, just stood and disappeared to retrieve her phone. When he returned, she looked up. Wait, did you carry me into the hospital? He paused. Didn't know if you remembered that. I didn't, but I think I saw your coat. Their staff didn't know who brought me in. That's how I wanted it. Why? Because the city already strips you down when you fall. You didn't need it taking your dignity. Her throat tightened. No response came. She stared out the window. Snow still fell. But now it felt gentler, like maybe the storm had found some grace. She had no idea who Silas really was, a janitor, a father, a widower. But more than that, he was steady, unshaken, and for reasons she couldn't explain. She didn't want to leave. Not yet. She turned to Ava. "Do you think your dad would let me stay a little longer?" Ava tilted her head. "He says people can stay if they're kind." "Are you kind?" Lara hesitated. "I'm learning." 3 days later, New York awoke and pretended nothing had ever happened. Horns blared, trains screeched, and the city slipped back into chaos. Lara Vance stepped into the gleaming lobby of Vance Industries, every polished inch of her pristine. But something was different. She saw herself in the mirrored elevator walls and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her phone buzzed. Her assistant's message screamed in caps, "Where are you?" But Lara didn't answer. She was watching a man in her mind's eye packing a school lunch with one hand and cradling loss with the other. And for the first time in years, she was late for something. And it didn't feel like a lost. It felt like coming home. "When the storm lets up, I'll get you a cab." Those had been his final words, and complicated, firm, and strangely gentle. Silas's voice had lingered in her like the warmth of a forgotten fire. Not a plea, not a request, no false promises or performative concern. He'd simply let her go as if she were anyone, as if the night hadn't carved something permanent between them. Now, back in her world of sharp edges and unrelenting schedules, Lara Vance moved through the corporate corridors like a ghost inhabiting its old skin. Her assistant, Amelia, hustled beside her, eyes on a glowing tablet, spitting updates like gunfire. "The board wants a full breakdown of the Copenhagen project. Investors are pushing to reschedule the quarterly call. Oh, and page 6 ran something about your disappearance." Lara blinked, her mind stuttering to catch up. "Page 6. Amelia nodded grimly. "They're calling it a nervous breakdown in the snow. We didn't comment per your standing orders, but..." She turned the screen toward her. There it was, a grainy still from a security cam outside Queen's General. Lara, half lucid. Bleeding was supported by a man whose face was blurred, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Broad shoulders, dark work coat, and a child's backpack hanging from one arm. Silas. Her breath hitched. Slowly, she reached for the tablet and zoomed in. The scarf, her scarf, no his. The same one he'd wrapped around her when her hands wouldn't stop trembling, when her body had stopped remembering how to be warm. Where was this taken? She asked quietly. "Queen's General, security footage, leaked anonymously," Amelia replied. Lara's fingers tightened around the tablet. "Amelia," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. "Can you request any public CCTV footage from outside there that night, around 12:45 a.m.? Should I go through legal?" Her assistant asked, wary. "No," Lara whispered. "I want it done quietly." Amelia paused, confused. "May I ask why?" Lara's gaze never left the screen. "Because I don't want the world to see him." That evening, Lara sat alone in her penthouse high above the city, the TV humming softly in the background. Her laptop flickered with the grainy video she had requested. She leaned in. The snow came down thick and fast, but even through the chaos of white, she could see him, Silas, charging through the storm with her limp body in his arms, Eva clinging to his coat like a tiny, fierce guardian. He burst through their doors, shouted something urgent to a nurse, and less than 5 minutes later walked back out alone. No scarf, shoulders hunched, a child's hand nestled in his palm, and he never once looked back. Lara watched the footage on repeat, frame by frame, until she reached the moment when he stood there holding her, unknown, unseen, and unsung. She sat back in her chair, heart thundering. "Silas," she whispered, into the emptiness. The next morning, Lara instructed Amelia to schedule a visit to one of the company's Midtown-sponsored public schools. "Why that one?" Amelia asked. "We haven't finalized the permits." "I have a hunch," Lara replied, offering nothing else. The school was unremarkable at first glance, a sturdy red brick building with peeling motivational posters and the lingering scent of cafeteria. spaghetti in the halls, but there was something comforting about its imperfections. Ms. Alvarez, the principal, led her through the corridors with contagious enthusiasm. We had to cut staff last year, she explained, but we lucked out with the guy we brought on. Lara's chest tightened before the name even came. Silas Cade. Alvarez smiled. Widower. Sweet little girl named Ava. Sometimes brings her along after school. Lets her draw in the boiler room while he works on the plumbing. Boiler room? Lara echoed. Oh, don't worry. It's warmer than my office. Alvarez laughed. They turned a corner, and there through a small glass window he was Silas, kneeling beside a rusted valve, sleeves rolled to his forearms, grease smudging his skin. Ava sat beside him humming softly. Surrounded by a fortress of paper and crayons, Lara froze. She didn't breathe. Here was the man who'd carried her through a storm, made her tea in a chipped mug, tended to her bleeding head with hands both rugged and kind, and then let her disappear without expecting anything in return. No spotlight, no story, no strings. She raised her hand to knock but stopped. Silas laughed at something Ava said, a real laugh, full, deep, and unfiltered, the kind of laugh born from a life that had nothing left to prove. Lara slowly let her hand fall and turned to leave. That night, barefoot in her silent, glittering penthouse, Lara stood by the window, staring down at the city pulsing beneath her. Her reflection shimmered in the glass, ghost-like. He didn't want to be found, but the truth tugged at her heart. Silas hadn't needed recognition, but somehow, without asking for anything, he had altered everything. At the school, Silas stood at the end of a dim corridor, mop in one hand, toolbox in the other, staring up at the flickering light outside room 204. It was always room 204. No matter how many times he rewired the thing, it still acted like it had a vendetta. He sighed, set the mop aside, and called down the hall. Ava, you good? I'm still coloring the dragon. Her voice echoed back. He can't have wings until his heart is kind. He smiled. That dragon had been evolving for 3 days. She took her time with kindness. Silas climbed the stool and unscrewed the panel. Wires flickered down the hallway. Lara stood just out of sight, hidden behind the office door. She hadn't meant to stop. She'd only planned to quietly drop off a check, an anonymous donation to keep the art program alive. But then she heard his voice, that same voice that slowed time when he spoke. She peeked again. There he was, focused, calm. His hands moved with the assurance of someone who knew how to fix what was broken. Not rushed, not flustered, just steady. Ava's voice rang out. Daddy, do you think dragons get lonely without pausing? Silas replied. Only the ones who forget how to breathe fire. Lara's heart twisted. That kind of answer didn't come from books. It came from lived sorrow, from knowing what it meant to feel alone and what it took to rise again. She turned to leave until Ms. Alvarez spotted her. Miss Vance, she called out brightly. Didn't know you were visiting today. Silas looked up at the sound. Their eyes met. The hallway fell still. Lara stepped forward, composed, nervous. I was just dropping something off. Silas climbed down, wiping his hands. Let me guess, the dragon fund. She smiled faintly. I might have added wings. He stared at her, then said, You didn't have to come. I know, she replied, her voice gentler. But I wanted to. Just then, Ava appeared in the doorway, her whole face lighting up. Miss Lara. Lara knelt instinctively, arms out as Ava barreled into her. She hugged the little girl tightly, surprised by how natural it felt. You came back, Ava whispered. I did, Lara murmured. I missed you, Ava giggled. Daddy says if someone shows up twice, it means they're real. Lara looked at Silas. His jaw clenched just slightly. Did he now? They walked through the snow-covered schoolyard as the sun dipped low, shadows stretching across the ground. You didn't answer my message, Lara said quietly. I didn't know there was a question, Silas replied. She stopped walking. You saw me. I did. And you left. I did. Why? He turned to face her. Because whatever happened between us, it happened in a storm, in a moment, and moments like that they pass. Her voice cracked but stayed steady. It didn't pass for me. He studied her. Lara, you're the kind of woman who owns buildings like this. I'm the guy who fixes the pipes when they leak. We don't belong in the same story. Maybe we should, she said. He blinked, caught off guard. I don't care about status, she continued. I care that you didn't hesitate when I was half dead in the snow. I care that you made space for a stranger and a child at the same time. That you didn't tell anyone what happened. That you let me go without needing anything. She stepped closer, her voice softened, trembling. Do you know how rare that is? He barely spoke. Maybe that's why I don't belong in your world. She stared at him, her heart open, fragile. You belong in any world you choose. I'm not good at halfway, he whispered. That's okay, she said, smiling gently. I'm stubborn enough to go the extra mile. That night, Silas sat beside Ava's bed, watching her sleep, one hand curled around her dragon drawing, the other clutching her rabbit. Lara's words echoed like a heartbeat. You belong in any world you choose. He looked at his hands scarred, calloused, tired hands that had patched drywall and carried grief, hands that had given without asking, and for the first time in years. He let himself wonder, was it okay to want more? The envelope sat untouched on his tiny kitchen table, die heavy, ivory, embossed with gold. No return address, just his name, Silas Cade. He didn't need to open it. He already knew. Lara had given it to him quietly, her voice steady. I'm offering you something real, she'd said. Not charity, not pity, just possibility. Now it sat there, possibility tangible and terrifying. Daddy, Ava stood in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. Can I sleep in your bed tonight? Of course, Bug, he said, his voice hoarse. She climbed under the covers, rabbit in tow. Her eyes drifted to the envelope. Did the lady give you a present? Something like that. Is it for fixing things? He paused. In a way, Ava yawned. Then maybe you should say yes. He chuckled softly. Why's that? Because when people trust you to fix things, it means they believe in you. He blinked. She'd seen too much for her age. She knew too much, and yet she was still kind. Silas kissed her forehead. Sleep, sweetheart. But he didn't sleep. The next morning, Silas stood outside a towering glass building in Midtown Manhattan. The sky and ambition reflected in every shimmering pane. He didn't belong here, and yet, here he was. Inside, the 48th floor stretched like a gallery minimal. Pristine, elegant. She stood near the window, framed by the skyline in a navy dress that said power and poise. You came, she said softly. Turning, I read the offer. He said, it's more than I've ever made. It's still less than you deserve. He looked at her, not just her face, but all of her, and for once, he let the thought settle. What if this wasn't a mistake? What if this her, them, this second chance was the kind of storm worth walking into again, and this time choosing to stay? Why me? The question came not from pride or disbelief, but from a place worn thin by years of being overlooked. Silas stood with that quiet tension in his jaw, hands calloused from labor and sacrifice, staring across Lara Vance's sleek, sun-drenched office. The woman before him held a world of power in her gaze, but none of it was used to intimidate. Lara stepped to her desk and picked up a folder, then crossed the room with purpose. She handed it to him with no ceremony. Inside, he found photographs peeling ceilings, corroded pipes, wiring on the brink of fire. It wasn't just damage, it was neglect. The new Vance Foundation Learning Center, she said. We bought the building last month. It's falling apart. Silas flipped through the pages, brow furrowed. And you want me to fix it? No. Lara replied with quiet certainty. I want you to lead the team. Your way, your standards, your integrity. He looked up sharply. There are 100 contractors who none of them carried me into an emergency room in the middle of a blizzard and walked away without asking for anything, she said. Her voice faltered just slightly. None of them made me believe. In quiet strength, Silas closed the folder slowly, the weight of it more emotional than physical. You do realize what this looks like, right? ACEO hiring the janitor who rescued her in a snowstorm? Lara didn't even blink. If I cared what it looked like, I'd be a coward, and I'm not. Silas exhaled through his nose. There was something about her, this woman born into steel and glass and six-figure expectations, who saw him with startling clarity. You're offering me a future, he said finally, one I didn't ask for. No, she said gently. I'm offering you a choice, something I imagined the world stopped giving you a long time ago. The words struck deeper than she could have known. Silas looked down at his hands that had wiped tears from a child's cheek. Patched roofs with scrap, stretched paychecks across impossible weeks. Hands that had never asked for more, only given. He thought of Ava, of rent and asthma meds and her latest drawing of a pancake-shaped dragon, of every dream he'd shelved quietly so she could believe in hers. And then he looked back at Lara, the woman who had everything and yet chose to open her hands. I'll do it, he said, on one condition. She raised her eyebrows. Name it. You don't owe me anything, not ever. Lara nodded slowly, a smile touching her lips. Agreed. But I still get to believe in you. He gave a soft, disbelieving laugh. That sounds like a dangerous habit. I'm known for those, she replied. That evening, Silas walked into his apartment still wearing the day's offer on his shoulders. Ava was drawing at the kitchen table, her tongue poking from the corner of her mouth as she concentrated. She looked up. Did you get the job? I think I did, he replied. Her face lit up like morning. Do we get to eat real pancakes? Now, real pancakes, he teased. Not the box kind. Nope, the kind with crispy edges. Silas crouched beside her, laughter cracking from him like sunlight through frost. How about this? We start this new chapter with a pancake breakfast. You, me, maybe a guest. Ava tilted her head. Miss Lara, only if she's brave enough to face your SERP standards. Ava giggled. I'll make extra dragon. Once. He tousled her hair, the smile lingering longer than it had in years. For the first time in memory, the future didn't feel like a tightrope over concrete. It felt like a door finally unlocked. The Vance Industries Midtown Tower was a monolith of ambition. Polished floors gleamed like mirrors. Light filtered through engineered angles designed to flatter not faces, but egos. Silas stepped into his atrium wearing a stiff button-up and a borrowed tie, the kind of attire that made his shoulders itch. He didn't feel like he belonged, but he walked anyway. Mr. Cade, a voice sliced through the sterile calm. A man in a fitted suit approached, tablet in hand. This way, sir. Miss Vance is expecting you. Silas followed him through glass corridors until they reached a conference room with a view that made his lungs tighten. Inside, executives and tailored armor turned toward him. At the head of the table sat Lara, poised and unflinching. She stood. Everyone, this is Silas Cade. He'll be leading our site operations at the Foundation Learning Center project. Silence. A silver-haired man cleared his throat. That's unorthodox. Lara smiled tightly. So is a city that lets its schools rot while investing in rooftop cocktail lounges. Eyebrows rose. Another cough. The same man spoke again, more pointed. At Mr. Cade's experience, Silas stepped forward. His voice was steady. I've worked maintenance for 17 years. I've rebuilt failing plumbing with second-hand parts. I've fixed broken heaters and winter blackouts. I've worked graveyard shifts while raising a daughter alone. I don't have degrees, but I know what keeps a building standing. The silence afterward was heavier than before. Then Lara added, her voice soft but final, and I trust him with mine. That did it. The room stilled in quiet reverence. Afterward, as they walked toward the elevator, Silas muttered, You didn't have to do that. What introduced you like you belong? She said, You went toe-to-toe with your board. I hired you because I believe in you, Silas, not because I need to explain you. He studied her. You're not afraid of pushing back. She turned to face him. I've learned the higher you climb, the more you're expected to look down. But I remember what it felt like to be invisible, and I swore, if I ever had power, I'd use it to lift someone who didn't. Silas clenched his jaw. You don't need to lift me. I'm not, she replied softly. I'm walking beside you. Weeks passed. Silas settled into the role like it had been carved into his bones. He hired a crew of workers like him, quiet, competent, overlooked. Fathers, veterans, men with weathered hands and no interest in credit. He walked the site every morning at 6, coffee in hand, notebook in his back pocket. Ava would visit on weekends, calling the construction her castle in progress, running through the echoing hallways with her paper crown flopping sideways. Lara came often, never with an entourage, never in heels. She wore jeans and questions, real ones, the kind that meant she was listening. One afternoon, they stood in what would become the music room. She was staring out the window, quiet. You okay? Silas asked. She nodded. When I was little, my mom worked 3 jobs. I barely saw her. But once a month, she'd take me to the library on 42nd and Park. We'd sit by the radiator and read until they closed. It was the only place I felt like I could breathe. She turned to him, voice barely a whisper. She died before I made my first million. I always thought, if I got loud enough, she'd hear me. Silas stepped closer. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is stay. She looked at him long and hard. Is that what you did? Stayed for Ava every day? She smiled. Not polite, not performative. A smile full of something honest. You're better at this world than you think, she said. He shook his head. This isn't my world. Then maybe, she whispered, we build one where both of us belong. That night, Silas stood at his apartment window. The Vance Tower glittered in the distance, elegant, unreachable. But then his eyes dropped to the dragon drawing taped to the fridge, the cracked teacup. From Lara, the boots he wore every day. Dot, and for the first time, it didn't feel like her world, and his Dot, it felt like maybe, just maybe, there was space for both. Dot, the invitation came in thick cream envelope, raised gold letters, the kind of thing that didn't need to say, you don't belong here, because it assumed you already knew. A private dinner, cocktail attire, families welcome. Silas stared at it for a long time. Ava, he called. She ran in, her paper crown slipping sideways. Yes, Your Majesty, we've been invited to dinner. Fancy dinner. The kind with more forks than food. Ava blinked. Do they have juice? I think it comes in glass. Wow, she whispered. Then after a pause, do. They let kids come. They do. She nodded solemnly. Okay, I'll wear my crown. Lara adjusted a candle that didn't need adjusting. The ballroom shimmered in soft gold. Jazz floated in the air, and laughter curled around crystal chandeliers. Everything gleamed, curated to perfection. She glanced at the door every few minutes, pretending she wasn't hoping. Amelia passed with a tray of champagne, waiting for someone. Maybe. Lara murmured. And then he arrived. Silas, in a suit that didn't quite fit, but carried his quiet dignity. His tie was crooked, his shoes were scuffed, and beside him, even navy dress, plastic crown, blinking rabbit purse. Lara exhaled. They didn't belong here, and yet they were the only ones who felt real. You came, she said, crossing to him, still waiting for security to escort me out. She grinned. I bribed them, Miss Lara. Ava whispered, do you have pancakes here? Lara knelt. It's mostly complicated cheese tonight. Ava leaned in, conspiratorial. That's okay. I brought crackers in my purse. Lara smiled. Smart girl. Later, Ava played with other kids in the care suite. Silas nursed a club soda at the edge of the room. Lara appeared beside him with 2 plates. They said it's duck, she said. Pretty sure it's just confused. Chicken? He laughed. Ava still thinks nuggets are a food group. I like her already. He glanced around. You moved through this world like you were born into it. I wasn't, she replied, but I learned the steps. Is there a manual? There is, she smirked, but no one reads it. We just copy each other and pretend. Then, after a beat, why me? She turned serious. What do you mean? You could have chosen anyone. Contractors, architects, men with polished shoes and smoother lines. Lara met his eyes. Because you didn't try to sell me anything. You didn't pitch. You didn't perform. You just showed up. For me, for Ava, for a stranger bleeding in a storm. Her voice softened. You didn't fix my problem, Silas. You reminded me I wasn't broken, and in that glittering ballroom, with glass chandeliers and linen-covered lies all around, Silas finally understood some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be lived. Asterisk, you reminded me I didn't have to face it alone. It was after dessert, the ballroom's golden glow beginning to fade as guests filtered into the night beneath chandeliers. And chauffeur murmurs, Lara spotted Eva, small and still, sitting near the edge of the children's area, lost in the world of crayon and paper. Hey, Lara said softly, lowering herself to the carpet beside her. What's that? Eva turned the drawing toward her proudly. A child's vision, 3 stick figures beneath the sky dotted with falling snow, one tall, one small, one with a sparkling crown. That's you, Eva whispered. Because you're brave. Lara blinked, caught off guard. Me? Eva nodded. Daddy says brave doesn't mean loud. It means you do the right thing even when you're scared. Lara's throat tightened. Your daddy is a wise man. Eva shrugged. Yeah, but he still doesn't know how to braid hair. Later, as the night dwindled and the music softened to silence, Silas zipped Eva into her coat. His rough, time-worn hands steady in deliberate hands that had built lives for others, but never asked for one of his own. Lara walked them to the exit. Thanks for coming, she said quietly. Silas looked at her, then Eva, then back again, his expression unreadable. Don't thank me. She tilted her head gently. Why not? He swept his gaze toward the chandeliered room, the polished illusion of perfection. Because this, he motioned to the grandeur around them. This isn't us. She hesitated. Then what is? He didn't answer. Not yet. But just as they stepped into the cold, Eva called over her shoulder, Miss Lara. Yes, sweetheart. Next time, can we just have pancakes at our house? Lara smiled, something warm and aching rising inside her like a memory that hadn't yet happened. That sounds perfect, and for the first time in a long time, the ache in her chest wasn't from emptiness. It was from longing, the kind of ache that only came when you realized the life you always wanted might be the one you never planned for. Silas sat in the dark, the only light coming from the phone screen in his hand. The headline burned across it like a brand. CEO's fall linked to janitor. His hands shook not from anger, and not even from shame but from something colder. Fear. Fear for Ava. She slept just in the next room, curled around her dragon, drawing, blissfully unaware that the world outside their walls was unraveling faster than her father could. Hold together, Dot. He set the phone down, face down, as if that would silence it. But the words were already etched into his mind like scars. He didn't care about the word janitor. He had earned every callous. But Lara, she hadn't deserved this. And now the media, the board, the vultures, they were using him as the excuse to tear her down. He wouldn't let that happen. Not again. Not to someone who had dared to believe in him. That morning, he'd arrived at the construction site as he always did, 6:03 a.m., coffee in hand. But the air had changed. Tighter. Eyes followed him. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Something had cracked. Jerry from his crew approached hesitantly. Hey, you seen the papers? Silas shook his head. Jerry handed over his phone. There was a photo from the Vance dinner. Him in that slightly too small suit. Ava's crooked crown. Lara laughing beside them. The caption was a dagger. From janitor to insider. Who's the man stealing the CEO's attention? That afternoon, Lara showed up at the site. Her coat danced in the wind. Her heels clicked against concrete. Her face was beautiful as ever, but her eyes were tired. Silas met her at the trailer. No words, no pleasantries. She handed him a folder, inside an internal memo. Effective immediately, Lara Vance suspended, pending board review. The words knocked the ground from beneath him. You didn't deserve this. He murmured, "Neither did you." She replied softly, his voice sharpened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew what you'd do." His jaw clenched. "And what's that?" She held his gaze. "Run." He stepped back, heart hammering. "Don't," she said, her voice cracking. "Don't disappear on me." He looked at her for a long time, something wounded sparking in his eyes. "You fought for a world that never wanted you, and now they're using me to break you. You're not the reason this is happening," she said, pain tugging at her voice. "I'm the excuse they needed," he replied. "And now I'm the shadow cast over everything you built." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, handed it to her. "What is this?" "My resignation." Her breath caught. "Silas, I won't let Ava grow up watching her father be the reason a good woman falls. You're not the reason." "Yes, I am. Maybe not directly. But I walked into a world I was never meant to stand in, and I cracked something." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, don't do this." "I already did." That night, Lara returned to her penthouse. Outside her door, a small box sat quietly like a goodbye waiting to be opened. Inside, the scarf, the same one Silas had wrapped around her trembling, framed that snowy night. Clean, folded, pressed dot on top of it, a note. "You don't owe me, but I owe my daughter peace." She sat on the edge of her bed, clutching the scarf like it might still carry his warm dot. It didn't dot, it only carried absence. Back at home, Silas sat by Ava's bed, her breathing soft and steady. She stirred. "Daddy, I'm here." "You're sad," she murmured. He tried to smile. "A little." "Did Miss Lara not like the dragon pancakes?" He swallowed hard. "It's not that." "Then why?" He brushed her hair back. "Sometimes grown-ups live in different stories, and they don't know how to read each other's pages." Ava blinked, half asleep. "Then maybe they should read slower." He kissed her forehead. "You're too wise for your own good." "No," she mumbled. "I'm just brave. Like her." Rain tapped against the windows of Lara's empty office as she turned off the lights. The skyline flickered beneath her. Somewhere in that sea of glass and steel was a little girl who wore a crown made of crayons. Lara whispered into the silence, "I never wanted him to save me. I just wanted him to stay." Days passed, then weeks. The board had voted. The press had quieted. The Foundation Learning Center sat silent, paused mid-dream. But what kept Lara awake wasn't scandal. It was the echo of a child's wisdom. Maybe they should read slower. It wasn't just Silas who had vanished. It was Ava, too. That giggle, that crown, that fierce hope. For the first time since her mother died, Lara felt orphaned not by death, but by distance, by a goodbye she hadn't wanted. Late one night, a junior assistant arrived with a delivery. From the Midtown site, he mumbled, offering a smudged envelope dot inside, a folded paper, wrinkled, clearly loved, a drawing, 3 stick figures beneath, a snowy sky, one tall, one small, one with a crown. A dragon hovered above them, smiling. On the back, in crooked letters, for Miss Lara, "We miss you. Love, Ava." Below that, a line in smaller handwriting. "She drew this yesterday. I told her not to send it, but she said you looked lonely in the picture." I couldn't argue with that. Silas Leora pressed the page to her chest. The ache wasn't soft anymore. It was sharp, unforgiving, a yearning for something she'd let slip through her fingers. The next morning, she walked into the boardroom not as ACEO, not as a brand, but as a woman who had finally remembered what mattered. "I'm resigning," she said simply. Gasps, whispers, a few smiles trying hard to hide satisfaction. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "You think this is about damage, control, but it's not." She held up the drawing. "This is why." Bewildered faces. "This is Ava. That's Silas. That's me. We were an APR stunt. We were a beginning, and I refuse to be part of a system that punishes people for being real." She paused, voice steady. "I'm not walking away from failure. I'm walking toward the truth." Then she walked out. No press release, no applause, just a woman carrying a child's drawing like it was the most priceless thing she'd ever held. 3 weeks passed. Lara disappeared from headlines, but not from purpose. She swapped boardrooms for food banks, donated anonymously, volunteered without photos. She became what her mother had always wanted her to be, not famous, not feared, but present. Then, one afternoon, while helping a child into an oversized winter coat at a youth fair, someone tapped her shoulder. She turned. No one there. Just a small envelope resting on the table. Inside a flyer, the Ava Fund inaugural gala, supporting single-parent tradespeople at low-income schools. A sticky note attached. You started this. We just gave it a name. No signature. She didn't need one. 2 days later, she stood in a church-turned-community center, folding chairs, plastic tablecloths, laughter that didn't need to be polished. On stage, a girl read a poem about dragons and moms and stars that refused to stop shining. Lara smiled. Then she heard him, a voice like home. I didn't think you'd come. She turned. Silas, in flannel, a little thinner, a little tired, still solid, still real. Ava invited me, she said softly. Apparently, she runs the foundation now. He chuckled. She thinks dragons need better branding. They stood quietly, surrounded by joy. I didn't come back for a speech, she said. Good, he replied, because I didn't prepare one. I came because she faltered, because I missed her. He tilted his head, and she looked at him, honest, unafraid. I missed you, too. He studied her, then finally spoke. You don't have to save the world to matter in it. Her breath caught. You matter, he said. You always did, but now you believe it. Tears welled in her eyes. Do you? I'm learning, he whispered, taking her hand. That night, after the tables were cleared and the lights dimmed, Ava ran across the room and hugged Lara tightly. You're staying this time, right? Lara crouched. If your dad lets me. Ava turned to Silas. He shrugged with a small smile. She did draw us into the same picture, and for once, no one needed to say another word. Outside, the autumn air was crisp. Silas stood before the newly reopened Foundation Learning Center. A red ribbon fluttered across the entrance. Laughter drifted from the courtyard where volunteers passed out cocoa and books. He looked at the building, but more than that, he saw the chance, not just for Ava, not just for Lara, for all of them. This wasn't just concrete and drywall. It was a new beginning, and this time, he was ready to stay. Asterisk, do you ever feel like you're just holding your breath for a life you're scared to want? The words escaped Silas before he could contain them. Carried off into the quiet of the early morning, Lara's voice came from behind, soft and sure. All the time, he turned. She stood just a few steps away, wrapped in a slate gray coat, understated and graceful. Her hair fell in loose waves around her face. But it was her eyes that struck him most, the eyes of a woman who had been wandering for far too long and had finally found her way home. You weren't supposed to be here until later, he said. She shrugged. It's our ribbon. Figured I earned the right to cut it. A pause passed between them. You okay? She asked gently. Silas hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. It just doesn't feel real yet. It will. They stood side by side in silence, looking out over the small courtyard, the laughter of children already echoing faintly from inside. Then Lara turned toward him. You want to do the speech? He raised an eyebrow. You're the one with the degree in public miracles. She smiled, the rare kind that cracked through years of guardedness. But you're the one who made this real. Silas exhaled slowly. I don't have the words for things like this. Then speak from the place you always do. He frowned, unsure. From your quiet, she said. It's louder than most people's shouting. Minutes later, Silas stood before a crowd gathered on sidewalks and folding chairs. Parents, kids, teachers, former janitors, people whose hopes were larger than the backpacks they wore, and heavier than any job title ever printed on paper. He stepped up to the mic, adjusted it, cleared his throat. I'm not great with speeches, he began, but I've spent most of my life fixing things, doors that wouldn't close. Lights that wouldn't turn on. Heaters that gave up halfway through winter. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, but this, he motioned to the newly restored building behind him, this wasn't about fixing. This was about believing. He paused, found Lara's eyes in the front row. Ava sat beside her, legs swinging, a new hoodie hugged around her frame, a cartoon dragon smiling across her chest. I didn't think someone like me belonged to buildings like this, Silas continued, until someone showed me I did. Sometimes, the people who know how to keep the lights on should also help design the room. He stepped back, heart pounding. There was no applause, not at first, just breath, a collective moment where the world seemed to hold itself still. Then Ava jumped to her feet, fists raised. 3 cheers for Daddy. Laughter broke the hush. Then came the clapping, not thunderous, but true. Later that day, Lara stood in the atrium near a wall titled Our Builders. Between thank you notes and candid photos hung a single image, front and center. It wasn't edited or staged. It showed Silas kneeling beside Ava, both wielding paintbrushes. A streak of blue arched across Ava's nose. A smudge of green clung to Silas's cheek, and underneath it, in simple block letters, some foundations are built from love. Tears welled in Lara's eyes. No one needed to know what she had lost to arrive here, only what she had found. That evening, after the crowds had thinned and the sun dipped behind the buildings, Lara sat barefoot on the back steps of the center, her heels discarded beside her. The stone was cold against her skin. She welcomed it. Silas joined her quietly, handing her a cup of cocoa. She took it and sipped. This might be the best thing I've ever tasted. He smirked. It's just Swiss, miss. She looked down at the cup. Tastes like forgiveness. He tilted his head. You needed forgiving. For doubting that love didn't have to be complicated. She turned to him, her voice steady now. I thought I had to earn love. That I had to be useful, flawless, unbreakable. But you, she paused, eyes softening. You taught me that love doesn't arrive when you're perfect. It finds you when you're real. Silas swallowed, hard. I spent my whole life trying not to be a burden, he said. But with you, I never felt heavy. Her voice broke just slightly. That's because you carried me, too. They sat still, listening, feeling. Then Silas glanced at her. Are we doing this? I don't know, she whispered. But I don't want to not do it anymore. His hand reached for hers, found it already waiting. That night, the living room was dim, quiet, blanketed in the soft light of cartoons. Silas, Lara, and Ava huddled under a single blanket, a tangle of limbs and warmth. Ava tiptoed across the floor and climbed into Lara's lap. Can I tell you something? Lara brushed a strand of hair behind the little girl's ear. Always. I think the building's happy now. Lara smiled. Why? Because it finally got to be a home. Outside, the snow began again, not the kind that snarled traffic or closed schools, but the gentle, hush the world kind. The kind that softened even cracked sidewalks into lullabies. Silas stood on the porch of the center, a string of warm lights glowing overhead. The laughter had faded, but inside, something still flickered through the window. Lara sat cross-legged on a rug in the reading room, mouthing words from a picture book. Not because she needed to read it, because Ava had asked her to practice for tomorrow's story hour. The dragon didn't roar. She whispered to herself. It whispered. Somehow, it made more sense than anything she had ever said in a boardroom. Silas stepped inside quietly. You know, he said, leaning in the doorway. I never imagined you'd trade the Vance Tower for a beanbag chair and cardboard dragons. Lara looked up, closed the book. Turns out, I like the view from down here. He settled beside her. I used to think people like you were made of glass, he said, fragile, distant, meant to be seen, but never touched. She took his hand. You didn't hold me, she said. You saw me. That's rarer. He squeezed her fingers. You didn't have to stay, you know. I know. Why did you? She turned to the crayon-covered wall behind them. Smiling suns, castles, stick figures holding hands. In one, Eva had drawn a house with 3 windows, 3 hearts on the door, Because, Lara said, the first place that ever felt like home didn't have walls. It had names. Later that night, Silas was packing the last of the tools in the back supply room. The center was whole now. But he felt the tug of transition. Was this an ending or a new beginning? Lara found him there under the warm halo of the utility lamp. You okay? He nodded, just thinking. Dangerous, she teased. She stepped closer. You've given this place your heart. So have you. I had money, she said. You had meaning. He turned toward her. I had you. They stood in the silence of everything that had been unsaid. Then Lara took a breath. I'm leaving next week. His heart caught. Leaving just for a little while. Chicago. They're starting a similar project. Asked me to consult. Share what we built here. He said nothing. Say something, she asked. He stared at the floor. I want to be happy for you. You can be, she said, because you're coming with me. He looked up, startled. What? You heard me. He chuckled. Lee, I don't do cities with $5 lattes and underground parking garages. She stepped closer. That's okay. I don't do cities without you. Their eyes locked. What about Ava? She already packed her glitter shoes. He blinked. Lara's voice softened. Silas, I don't want to build anything without you anymore. Not buildings, not plans, not a life. He exhaled, then smiled. You sure? I'm sure. Okay. He nodded. But next time you say you're taking me with you, maybe lead with the part where you want me. Not just my construction skills. She laughed. Deal. 2 weeks later, at a quiet gate in a modest airport, Ava bounced on her toes, gripping her backpack. Do you think Chicago has pancakes? Silas laughed. I think they invented them. Lara raised an eyebrow. That's not historically accurate. Doesn't matter, he said, ruffling Ava's hair. As long as they're warm. As they boarded, Ava dashed ahead to claim the window seat. Silas and Lara followed, bags in hand, hearts full. Before taking his seat, Silas looked out the window. The learning center stood in the distance, glowing in the snow dot, and though he was leaving it behind, he hadn't walked away. He left it better, and it had done the same for him. That night, in a small apartment in Chicago, they didn't bother unpacking. Ava fell asleep wrapped in a blanket of storybooks and plush dragons. Silas and Lara sat on the fire escape, sipping tea, shoulders touching. You still scared? She asked. He shook his head. Not anymore. Why not? He kissed the top of her head. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not just building something. I'm living it. She smiled. Into the night, he looked out at the quiet city and whispered, almost to himself, turns out, sometimes the janitor was just an architect in disguise. And so, they didn't just repair walls. They built a life. One small, quiet miracle at a time. Because sometimes the stories whispered the softest are the ones that echo the longest. Silas didn't wear a cape. He didn't change the world from a podium. He changed it through kindness, through presence, through the choice to stay. And Lara learned this. Real power isn't what you build. It's who you build it with. And you, yes, you who's reading this now, where are you watching from? Which part of this story stirred something in your heart? We'd love to know in the comments. If this story reminded you that hope still lives in quiet places and ordinary people, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us share more stories like this one. Until next time, stay kind, stay rooted, and never underestimate the quiet ones.